there a best practices committee as one of this?
Yes.
Because I was wondering, I mean, I'm very new, so I'm just, again, trying to get a handle on procedures. Would it be appropriate to talk about it and then throw some of the options to a best practices committee?
There's a couple members here who are on it, so.
Oh, okay. What do they think?
If I may, the best practice committee is a brand new committee. It's had 5 meetings. And my suspicion is, if you asked us what you should do, it would take us a couple of months to let you know what we thought. And so I appreciate the idea, and I would hope that that we all will institute best practices in this process. But the best practices committee is not a place you're gonna get a quick answer.
One thing I'd like to add, a little bit apart from that, Catherine, to Wayne's description is, I think a chunk of the planning board members, I can't speak for all of them, want to make sure that the mission and charge of the planning board isn't really diluted. I'm somewhat nervous giving it this new committee the title of Rezoning Committee. I think that maybe gives it that kind of message that everything's going to be rezoned within the city, and all of the rezoning things are happening through this committee. I think, Wayne, you lay out pretty well that these zoning changes can really come from any place. They can come from citizens through a councilor, they can come from the transportation, parking commission. So we don't want to lose that and give the message that all the zoning changes are going to focus on this. I don't know, the long title, the rezoning, related to the sustainability plan, I don't know what we call it, but I just want to be mindful of that as we move forward, so that what normally happens at the planning board will be changed somewhat, but not to be.
And one that relates to that, which is, I think when we talk about rezoning, there's a perception in the community, we're talking about map changes, going from a residential district to a commercial district, for example. When you look at Sustainable Northampton, more things that are discussed are really more in the nature of how does the process actually work. So when someone comes for a cluster subdivision, what does that actually mean? What does the project look like in the end? So it's the same thing in terms of terminology, is getting people to understand what the work of this process really looks like.
I saw Councilor Dostal's hand and then Councilor Matthews.
I think that what has to happen here, the stakeholders have to be represented here. I don't see just 2 city councilors and 2 members of the planning board sitting down as a committee. The stakeholders are the citizens of the city, and they're most concerned with what happens in their neighborhood. And we have to find the vehicle to get the input from the stakeholders on this. And there has to be an avenue, whether it be subcommittees, but there has to be a structure set up for that.
And one thing the Best Practice Committee has done is we have identified best practices in a number of other cities, which can inform this decision by the city council and the planning board. But the Best Practice Committee is not the place to get an opinion. But there really is a lot of useful information on the Best Practice Committee website, which is part of the city website. There are links to a dozen or more very useful sets of policies that other cities have instituted, or that educational institutions or have done research about. So there's lots of information out there about ways in which we could, and I agree with Councilor Dostal, we really have to find a way both to keep this efficient, but to get stakeholder input early on.
We have 3 approaches here on the list, so, yeah, Councilor President.
The way the proposal is now, it seems very similar, the rezoning committee, to the joint committees that the council has with the planning board and the school committee, representatives of each. And I guess it really depends on what the goal is. And if it's just to kind of coordinate the communication between the 2 bodies, I think that would probably be a good model. But I'm thinking that if you really want to hear more from people about thoughts about what's going on and get ideas, that it needs to be more of maybe the model of an advisory committee. and that there be more representative. And I think just having a member, for example, having a member from one of the neighborhood groups is not necessarily representative unless there's an assurance that there's a way of that person going back and reporting back. So I think that we need to do a little bit more structuring and to make sure that these folks who are having these positions are in fact representing, that they're going back, having a dialogue and bringing the ideas. I think there's much more value in that, and I think that if one of the goals of this is to broaden the conversation in the community around zoning ideas, I think the direction to go is more in including more citizens than having a communication committee with the council, which is, I think, is essentially how I'm envisioning this here with 2 councilors, 2 planning board members, and the mayor. I don't think that does a lot to broaden the conversation.